Scott Holliday here, and welcome back to Plus 2 Wrestling. It's the holidays, and I have a little bug. I have a little bit of sickness, so if I don't sound exactly correct, good on you for discovering that. And if this didn't come out on time, I apologize. And if this did come out on time, I apologize. This is the worst of 2023 video, so it's pretty negative. So, sorry. Let's plug in. Sunday, January 7th, at the beautiful State Theater in Havre de Grace, Maryland, it is the annual CZW Scouting Combine. We are looking for new people to join the CZW roster. If you think that's you, then I need you to send an email to talent@czwrestling.com with your resume and demo reel. And then you'll be invited to take part in some of our training drills. And then a select few will be chosen to wrestle on the Combine show. Additionally, we are looking for referees and commentators. So if you're a commentator, then you'll be working directly with me. Remember, it's 500 squats before you put on a headset. I'm kidding, of course. But if you want to come sit next to me and call some action, then dress for success and make sure you send an email to talent@czwrestling.com, and for all the information, go to czwrestling.com. Saturday, March 9th, it is the biggest independent wrestling show in Maryland history at the Power Plant Live in Baltimore. CZW presents Don't Blink.
Don't blink. Go get that up them rags. Don't blink. Lift them eyes wide open, get up, stay focused. Don't blink. Go get that up them rags. Don't blink. Lift them eyes wide open, stay up. I'm going in for the cure to the Lord. I ain't done.
Today on the Soapbox, I want to be honest with you, I don't really like doing these worst of lists. Being a wrestler is really hard, and everyone's trying their best. And who am I to sit here and say that people did bad? I'm Scott Holliday, and this is Plus 2 Wrestling, and I'm sick and cranky. So let's do this. Here is the worst of 2023. Worst storyline. I was fully prepared to give this award to QTV. QTV didn't help anybody. All it really did was pull down Powerhouse Hobbs by putting him in a sketch that no one really wanted to see, that was also really dated, and also kind of put QT Marshall in this bad light where he was already not being taken seriously, and now he's in this weird TMZ role, which I just did not care for. However, I looked at all the storylines and I refreshed my memory and thought about all the things I said last year about what went into a good storyline and what went into a bad storyline, and I've decided I'm going to cheat. I'm going to pick a storyline that actually took place in its entirety in 2022. But I'm going to pick this because with the power of hindsight, I can see the damage that this storyline did. And this is something I need to do to correct a wrong. My pick for worst storyline is the storyline I gave the award for best storyline to in 2022. Because now that it's over, I can see how damaging Chris Jericho as ROH champion was. I was so excited by this idea of Chris Jericho acting like he is finally giving value to ROH and battling all these past champions. And I thought about all the dream matchups that we were going to get to see. We were going to get to see Chris Jericho versus Christopher Daniels, Chris Jericho versus Roosh, and we saw none of the matches we wanted to see. On top of that, the matches we did get didn't go anywhere and didn't help anybody. He beat Colt Cabana, and then Colt Cabana disappeared, and now he's tagging with Brandon Cutler, which I hope they do something with. He fought my absolute favorite peacock, Dalton Castle, and then it just ended up with Chris Jericho being this big bad guy from the WWE, holding the ROH title, making a mockery of the ROH title, and no one could take it away from him until Claudio, an ex-WWE guy, someone that was in ROH but was never champion, was able to take it off of him. And then the ROH title just kind of stayed on AEW television, and it actually caused ROH to drown as a product because its champion was never there. It was always on AEW TV, so why bother getting Honor Club? That whole descent of ROH this year really starts at Chris Jericho's reign, which had so much potential, could have risen so much interest in ROH, and instead just killed all momentum for it, and now ROH is just kind of weird and confusing. If it wasn't for Athena, there really wouldn't be much going on in ROH on its own. Like, the tag titles being on AEW television with Max and Cole, it's a great storyline, but they're not doing anything for ROH as a product. So, ROH as a product really is the worst storyline of the year, but it all starts with Chris Jericho. I apologize for saying that that was the best storyline of the year last year. I don't know what I was thinking. Worst return. Here comes the money. Here we go. Money talks. Here comes the money. Money, 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 money. Whew. Of course, shout outs for Snoop Dogg for saving this whole thing, but the moment I heard Shane McMahon's music hit at WrestleMania, my heart sank. Because we all knew when we saw Snoop Dogg and Miz in the ring on night 2 of WrestleMania that someone was going to come out. We had Pat McAfee on night 1. Someone was going to come out and embarrass The Miz again because he's that comedy heel. And then it was Shane McMahon. This bothers me on so many levels because Shane McMahon was to blame for that terrible Royal Rumble we got. And there were so many reports that Vince McMahon himself said Shane would never get another WWE pop because of what he did. And for him to get to come out and embarrass The Miz at WrestleMania just shows that they didn't learn anything, and there's no consequences if your last name is McMahon. I was heartbroken when I heard that. Not like I was expecting it to be someone that I really wanted it to be and have their moment at WrestleMania, but Shane McMahon doesn't deserve that pop. On top of that, I'm a Miz apologist. I think The Miz is great. I think he plays his role perfectly. I'm not saying, put all the belts on him or anything like that. The Miz does The Miz great. But I know we're supposed to understand that he's a comedy heel and he can lose and it won't hurt him any. But he did already wrestle Shane McMahon at WrestleMania and lose. Remember? They were the co-besties and then they exploded, and then The Miz lost when he hit a super duper plex off some scaffolding. He was the one delivering the move, but then the way they landed, Shane won. Like, it was an embarrassing way for a face Miz to lose that match. And now you are going to have him lose again to Shane McMahon in a comedy match. Like, you are creating a situation where when someone brings up Miz and Shane at WrestleMania, you are now forcing them to go, do you mean the co-besties exploding match or the 2-minute comedy match where he got embarrassed? Like, that match with Shane, it wasn't the best match of all time. But it was one of the few times where Miz got to be a babyface and get cheered in front of the WWE Universe. And in a way, having this match with Shane would have tainted that other match. So, in the end, it's best for Miz that what happened and he just kind of lost to Snoop Dogg and everyone can just be like, Snoop Dogg, the ring general. But man, do I hate that they put the Miz in the situation to job to Shane McMahon again at WrestleMania. It's not a return I enjoyed. Worst finisher. Now remember, with the rules of this, it needs to be a finisher that really came to light or was spotlighted this year. And I will say that if I wasn't using those rules, the worst finisher of the year is the Crossroads. Like, how many times have we seen Cody Rhodes hit a Crossroads and then need to hit another one to win a match? Like, immediately afterwards. Like, it's a finisher. Like, it's not like Randy Orton hits an RKO and then it's like, okay, 2 more of those and I'll have this match pretty much well in hand. No. On top of that, we saw Cody hit 2 in a row, go for a 3rd one, be unable to, and then lose to Roman Reigns. They did not make the Crossroads look good this year. But, per the rules of my own creation, that cannot be the worst finisher because the Crossroads has been around for quite some time. So instead, my worst finisher of the year goes to the Annihilator. 1, it's a terrible pun. 2, I'm not a fan of Nia Jax. I am not a Nia Jax apologist. I think she's done some really horrible things in the ring and she should go back to NXT for a bit and just kind of spruce things up. But the Annihilator is a terrible decision to put on Nia Jax if you ever want us as fans to look at her as a real competitor. Like, what the Annihilator is, at its core, is the Banzai Drop, which Yokozuna used for years. But Yoko could also really perform in the ring. Like, I know during his later years he had some mobility issues, but Yokozuna could hit super kicks. Like, he had mobility. Like, he would hit the ropes and hit leg drops and things like that. The Banzai Drop was just kind of like icing on the cake of this is a really big guy going to the center rope and dropping all that weight on you. It adds to his character. With someone like Nia, who's not hitting big flashy moves and really showing off her athleticism and strength with her offense, and giving her that finisher, you're basically just saying, Nia's really big. And that's a cruel thing to kind of saddle someone with as a gimmick. Yes, Nia is larger than most of her competitors, but to have her finisher be just her sitting on you, you need to build something stronger around it so it doesn't just become, wow, Nia Jax is big. And they didn't do that. So I feel bad for Nia Jax because Nia Jax is always just going to be the competitor that's bigger than all the other women. Unless they do something to repair her character. And giving her this finish is not the way to do it. So my worst finisher is the Annihilator. It also doesn't look great. And it looks like it's not safe. Worst non-wrestler. I'm going to be honest. I considered giving this to Prince Nana. I know everybody loves him, and they love the dance, but as a manager, this is really all he brings. Like, he is as helpful to Swerve as Pyro or a Bailey buddy. But I know people love him, and I feel like that would be a cruel thing to do. Another person that I think a lot of people think of when it comes to this is Rick Knox, who had a bad year as a referee, but I feel it's not my call because I was not in that situation. Referees put themselves in a very difficult spot all the time, and I know there's a lot of things we can be critical, but he did what he thought was best at those times, so I don't want to criticize him for that. I don't want to give it to commentary because I'm a commentator, but it's gonna go to commentary for this one. I'm not a big fan of the Excalibur Taz Shivani silliness that happens when they go to fight whenever they're in commercial on TBS. I think it's disrespectful to the people in the ring who are putting their bodies on the line while they're doing like bits. But I know it has its place, and a lot of people enjoy that kind of laid-back moment during the commercial breaks, so I don't want to be a party pooper. It's just my thing. I'll deal with it, and I will keep this award away from them. Kevin Patrick is a good person to have in my sights for this one. He said a lot of weird stuff as a commentator on Raw, to the point that he no longer commentates on Raw. But in the end, I unfortunately have to give it to someone who is like one of my guys. Someone that I really, really like. And fortunately for me, though, I can kind of take a step back and kind of feel okay giving him this award because he's going to focus more on wrestling than commentating. So he's going to step away. And I don't feel as bad because I have to give this to Matt Rayward. I like Aiden English. I think his work on 205 Live was great, but I caught the Multiverse United show that happened over WrestleMania weekend, and just the amount of miscues and miscalls and distractions that were being spouted made the show very hard to watch. Like, commentating is like the glue that holds the show together. They're the narrator. They're guiding the audience on the road of this show. And there's just a complete breakdown at this show of that happening. And I know he wasn't there on his own. Tom Haddiford was there, and I'm a big Tom fan as well. I was very upset when he left WWE, or was fired from the WWE. I think he was one of the best commentators they had, and it was foolish of them to let him go. He almost got this award because he is just as much to blame for this show, but something about the way Matt just didn't seem to be all there made me have to give this award to him. Sorry, buddy. I love the vaudevillains, but worst non-wrestler goes there. Get back in the ring, bud. I believe in you. Worst promo of the year. Recency bias made me immediately look at the Golden Jets versus Ricky Starks and Big Bill as the worst promo of the year. I know Kenny was hurting during that, so it feels wrong to give that to him. But it was a rough watch. But I look back at what I gave the best of the year, and I gave it to a person rather than a particular promo. So I'm going to give this to a person. The worst promo of the year is everything Ric Flair said this year. What are we doing? Like, Ric Flair has invited all the women in the front row back to his hotel room as long as they weren't too old. He also said that Sting was a great wrestler because they didn't rehearse. Like, I understand Ric Flair is an old man, and people have been saying, oh, he's just going old school. You know, he was bringing back the old Ric Flair character. But times have changed for a reason. Like, there's not a time where you go to the doctor and you're like, I have a headache, can I have some ibuprofen? And the doctor says, I could give you that, but let's go old school and drill a hole in your head to let the demons out. No, times have changed. We need to live in today. And Ric Flair has done nothing but damage Sting's retirement and AEW as a whole with everything that he spouts out. Some of them were pre-tapes. Some of them weren't even live. You could have done them again. Someone put Ric Flair on a leash and control what he says if you're gonna use him on TV. Because this is a bad look. And he's only had like 3 promos, and they've all had major issues. So, you know, show us the energy drink, and then have him be quiet, because Ric Flair is the worst promo of the year. Most overrated. I don't like this one. I don't like it. It feels mean for me to point at someone and say, hey, everyone thinks you're great, but I don't, and they're all wrong. That seems mean to say to a person. So, I'm not going to give most overrated to a person. I'm going to give most overrated to a match. This way, instead of me being negative, I'll take all the negativity that you're going to throw at me and I'll absorb it. because I'm going to say the most overrated match is Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay. Now, before you get upset, what they did in Japan is incredible. I'm talking about the Wrestle Dream match, which was a fantastic match until the finish. And that's what everybody says. Oh, this is match of the year. Yeah, the ending with Don Callis and the Screwdriver was overbooked. It's like, yeah, exactly. That's the problem. A finish like that is meant to upset you. Like, that's the design of a screwy finish, is you have an epic that leaves you disappointed and wanting that clear, decisive ending down the line. And down the line, it doesn't look like that's happening. Like, even before we found out that Kenny was unwell, another match between Ospreay and Kenny Omega was not something that was going to be happening immediately. And if this is the final chapter of their saga, it's really sad that it ends with Don Callis and a screwdriver. Like, I wanted a definitive ending to that story, to Kenny versus Ospreay, to Kenny versus Don Callis. And instead, it just kind of all fizzled away. And for some reason, it doesn't bother anyone the way it bothers me. If you think it's match of the year, enjoy it. Like what you like. For me, it's overrated. Most overutilized. Most overutilized means that they're used too much. They're overexposed. And unlike the previous one, I know exactly who this is going to. And it hurts for me to say it, but there's really one clear answer. And that's Chris Jericho. I love Chris Jericho. He is my favorite wrestler. Like, I'd put him number one. It's Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels right underneath him. But what makes Chris Jericho so special is he knows when to pull back, to disappear for a bit, to reinvent himself, and then come back. And we miss him. We have not had Chris Jericho go away his whole time in AEW. And his whole time in AEW, he's done some really good stuff, but it has mostly been, hey, here's a group, we've broken up, here's the new group. And that's been fine. But for the first time in Chris Jericho's career, at least in recent history, Chris Jericho feels directionless. Like, I wasn't big into the Golden Jets. I don't know why that was happening. I feel like you could have had a turn there where Chris Jericho turns on Kenny Omega and something interesting happens there, or they become tag champions and something interesting happens there. But there was nothing exciting about those two as a team that I could really sink my teeth into and be like, oh, it's Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega. Like, Chris Jericho has been on my TV so constantly that we have kind of forgotten what makes Chris Jericho special. And we're in a tough situation where Chris Jericho going away and returning is not something that's really in the cards anymore. Chris Jericho's getting up there in age and his career is winding down, so I don't know how many times we can get a break from Chris Jericho and the great Chris Jericho can return. This all hurts me to say, because like I said, I love Chris Jericho. But at this point, we need to be reminded what Chris Jericho is. He's an innovator. He constantly reinvents himself. And for him to reinvent himself, he needs to take a step out of the spotlight for a bit. We need to stop having an entire society appreciating him. If he steps away for a minute, the great Chris Jericho can return instead of this Chris Jericho. Oh man, I hate this. I love Chris. I really do, but everything I'm saying is true. First, tag team. Hey, so remember when I said I was sick earlier in the video? Well, I kept getting sicker and sicker as I recorded, and then I stopped recording, and then time passed, and I got a haircut. So, you're not crazy, my hair is suddenly shorter. Anyway, it was actually a pretty good year for tag team wrestling. I feel like every established tag team had some really good moments. I mean, the Guns, FTR, the Acclaimed, everybody kind of had a moment to shine if you were an established tag team. That's why the worst tag team this year is any thrown together women's tag team meant to fight for the WWE Women's Tag Team Championships. Like, I hate that they don't want to give a story to these titles, and then we just end up with Nikki Cross and Tegan Nox, Shotzi and Charlotte, Tegan Nox and Natalya. I mean, heck, the champions were Chelsea Green and Sonya Deville, which were a thrown together tag team. And then Sonya got hurt, so they threw in Piper Nivens just to make it another thrown together tag team. And they held the titles for over 120 days and had great defenses against the likes of Shayna Baszler and Zoe Stark. We need to invest in these titles if we're going to keep them. And to do that, we need to have some established tag teams. I'm really happy that Casey Catanzaro has the titles right now with Caden Carter. I'm glad that they're the champions now. Hopefully that'll reset going into 2024. Because thrown together tag teams is the worst tag team of the year. Worst event. To me, this is an obvious choice of what was easily the worst event that I watched this year, and it's Impact's Multiverse United. This is the epitome of a mainstream company putting on an indie show. This very much felt like we only have so much time, so let's try to squeeze everybody onto the card as fast as possible. I mean, listen to this. We started with a 6-way X Division scramble, followed by an 8-man tag, followed by a singles match, Jeff Cobb versus Moose, which was great. Jeff Cobb was actually my choice for Wrestler of WrestleMania weekend. But then we followed that up with a 4-way match for the Women's Championship, and then a 4-way tag team match. Every match was just a train wreck, and that goes along with the train wreck that was production. Like, I already talked about how bad commentary was, but the cameras, the editing, we were constantly cutting to the wrong thing, throwing to the wrong thing, missing the action, which when you have 8 men in every match, yeah, that's gonna happen. We lost audio at some point. Impact Wrestling never looked worse than at this show. They looked like they didn't know how to put on a wrestling show. And now that they're switching back to TNA, I'm hoping to get reinvigorated in TNA. But man, I was giving Impact another shot, and what a whiff. Impact's Multiverse United, which had help from New Japan, was the worst event of the year. Worst match. Now with this, I don't like to pick on people that are still growing. I try to stay out of like NXT and Level Up and people that are just, still learning the craft. I don't want to pick on poor Maxine Dupree, who got raked through the coals for her match with Rhea Ripley. Even though her gimmick is that she's still learning how to wrestle, I'm going to leave all of that alone. And I have to point at AEW, because AEW had the worst Texas death match ever seen in... Whoa! No. I had problems with this match, but overall it's good. I just wanted to nitpick and make a video about it. That's not the worst match of the year. Change that? Yeah. The Texas Chainsaw death match between Jeff Jarrett and Jeff Hardy. This should have been a Jeff on a pole match, and you win Jeff. Because, first off, the feud that these two had did not justify really any gimmick match. We were still quite a few steps away from the level of violence promised from a death match. And instead we got weird backstage lighting and bloodbaths, and Leatherface came out, and a new championship. There's another championship in AEW. Everything about this match is a mess. And I know it was like a commercial and they raised money and they gave it to charity. And you can do that. But you don't have to put on this match. And it was long. Like, we started backstage. We had to battle all the way to the ring. This should not have been on Dynamite because it was the worst match of the year. Worst wrestler. Now, I've said it many times at this point that I don't like being mean. I don't like saying that people are the worst. Wrestling is hard, and who am I to say that someone is the absolute worst at wrestling? So, I was going to give this award to me. I'm 0-1 this year. I had a match, yeah. I went one-on-one with the Spoiler in a Rhode Island no barbed wire match. That's a real thing that happened that you could watch right now over at the High Tension Wrestling YouTube channel. And watch Midsummer Nightmare, and I'll put a link somewhere on the screen. But that being said, I wasn't the best in the ring, but there's someone else who's not the best in the ring. I may be 0-1, but there's someone else who's 0-1. But the big difference, I was never called the next Kurt Angle. So I'm going to say that the worst wrestler of the year is Gable Stevenson. Gable Stevenson has been built up for years at this point. He was like a top Raw draft pick back when we were doing the brand extension again. And we did the big draft. They picked Gable Stevenson to be like this big breakout star. He was going to be the next coming of Kurt Angle, and he was going to light the wrestling world on fire. And then he disappeared for years, and then he had a bad match with Baron Corbin, who I personally like. I like Baron Corbin. I think he'd have a good match with anybody, except for Gable Stevenson. And I think this is going to be a sayonara to Gable Stevenson. You know what? Now that I think about it, I think that match was a draw. So he has a better record than me this year. But I'm still going to call him the worst wrestler of the year. You can beat me up, Gable. So if you want to take that as a victory, you can, because you're the worst wrestler of the year. And that's going to do it for the list. What do you think of my list? Do you want to yell at me for saying that Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay is overrated? I just don't think it's match of the year. It's not a bad match. I just don't think it's all the way up like people are saying. That's all. But leave that in the comments down below. And be sure to subscribe right here to Plus 2 Wrestling, because next week we're looking to the future. It is my top 10 independent wrestlers to watch in 2024. You're not going to want to miss that, so be sure to subscribe right here, ring that bell, and I hope you have a great day.